Juan DavidGonzález, and I'm from Colombia, and now I'm based in Berlin. And since 2010, I work together with Anja, and we work under the moniker OJOBOCA. Yeah, and we make films and performances and installations and photographs and yeah, stuff with images, I guess. We try to work with images in a way.
Yeah, my name is Anja Dornieden. As Juan said, we worked together since 2010, and I grew up in the former GDR, and I studied abroad, but now since 2010, we're based in Berlin.
And would you also share about this, the idea of start to collaborate and under this name of OJOBOCA? And maybe explain a little bit the meaning or the concept behind it.
Our collaboration was not really planned. It was more had to do with us moving to Berlin after our studies. So in 2010, we moved to Berlin, and being totally new here, had to figure out how to make a film on 60 millimeter in a city that we didn't know. And so we started to collaborate. We just thought, oh, let's just try this. We made very different films in grad school. I was more working on in the experimental field, I would say. Maybe my beginnings were with non-camera filmmaking. My thesis film was a documentary on Super 8, and Juan had on 60 millimeter and was more interested in narrative or fiction, even though it was maybe strange fiction. But so I think we had like different, we came from different or had different interests within studying. And yeah, we made that first film together. It was called Oshocks. I guess that's the first film we made. And through just working together, we decided to continue and have been working together since then.
And I guess it was mostly because we wanted to try to work with film. I mean, it was working with analog that kind of got us both sort of interested in the same fields because of teachers we had in New York, and I was always interested in working with 16 millimeter since before moving to New York. It was not something that was kind of available in Colombia, and then just just kind of getting to know that material or getting to know analog film and thinking, yeah, this is interesting, and starting to work with it. And then when we moved to Berlin, we realized we kind of had to start from scratch because we didn't really know anybody. We had a few contacts, but we didn't know anybody working with film. And it kind of became this kind of experiment of, okay, how do you kind of start again, like finding what are the labs, where do you buy film? I mean, it was also very different then than it is now. Just, you had to go find the Kodak office in Berlin and do this kind of stuff. And then you start meeting the kind of people in the scene slowly. And that's how we ended up hearing about Labor Berlin, and that there were people processing their own film, that they had a collective, that you could join it, or at least find out where they visit them at least and figure out what they were doing. And that kind of became our first kind of entry into the world of the film labs. And yeah, that first film we made was 3 minutes long, and it was really just, okay, how do you make a film in a new city from beginning to end? And we wanted to make a print because we were already interested in projection, like showing films on film, having watched films in the original format. In New York, it was kind of, it made sense to try to do that or continue that. Oh, can we make a film? Yeah.
And maybe just to add, like the Encounter of Labor Berlin, for not everybody who knows what an artist-run film lab is, like for us back then, it was also something completely new, because when we were studying in New York at that time, there were no film labs. Like everybody would just process, like first of all, we were part of a university, so you had resources at the university, but even people we knew outside of university, they would have like you develop their films in their bathroom, or but there was no at that time, like now there is
Artist-run film labs.
artist
There were
run
commercial
there were
labs.
commercial labs, but there were no artist-run film labs. So this was to us like a big discovery when we moved to Berlin and encountered Labor Berlin, and yeah, and joined also like shortly after.
And you both have working with analog film for a long time, and I was wondering what was the initial interest that make you want to use this media, and then also after so many years of making films, what is still interests you, or that is important for you using this media? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, I was interested in photography, analog photography. I was practicing it. I studied anthropology in Colombia, and I was taking photography classes kind of that had to do with that idea, with some idea of field work or visual anthropology. And that was just, there was a dark room at the school where you could work with still photography, process black and white, make enlargements. And I got really interested in that. And at the same time, I was always interested in film, just as a, yeah, as a viewer. And yeah, at some point I saw that some films that, let's say they were not like traditional films, but not exactly experimental films, so just films that were kind of low budget that I was seeing that were doing kind of interesting things, that they had been shot on 16 millimeter. And then I thought, oh, what is that? Like, it's this kind of more or it's not affordable, or yeah, some kind of other format that wasn't this big industrial thing where people could make different kind of films. And I thought, oh, I would like to know, I would like to learn that. And I think that was the initial curiosity for me. And then when I went to New York, it was because they were offering classes on 16 millimeter film. There was like a film course that you could take. We were in a media studies program, but within it, there was practice and theory. And the practice part, you could kind of choose between video or, different. It was very open, but one strand that you could choose was 16 millimeter production. And it was working with a Bolex and just learning the basics. And that's what I wanted to learn, just basics of, without really knowing, exactly what to do with it, but just kind of thinking, oh, I want to learn how to work those cameras, how to use it. And yeah, I mean, it was very different from whatever was available at the moment. In a way, it was this idea of trying something that it was special because you couldn't get access to it in a way normally, for me at least. And so it was kind of that thing of oh, what is this? And then when you started using it, and I think one of the big things is when you see, like when you shoot and then you watch what you shot, even if it's not a print at the beginning, even if you're just watching a scan, you really get kind of, if it speaks to you, you get really caught by it. You're like, oh wow, what is this? Look how it looks, like how like the qualities of that image. And then it just kind of, you start thinking about other things you can do with it. Like, oh, I can especially, you might shoot black and white. This is something also at one point, regular commercial cameras aren't producing black and white images. They were already all just in whatever version of color they had. So then you suddenly have this kind of black and white image that just has its own qualities, and you think, oh, it's pretty interesting. And then because we were in New York, we also got quickly put into contact with this also world of, whatever it's called, experimental film or avant-garde film, where people were really pushing the format, or had been for decades. And I think that was like this very important encounter, because we saw, or at least for me, I saw, oh wow, like it's not just that the image can be made in a certain way, but that you can really, there is a sense of freedom within it, because in a way you could work by yourself and really explore in this sort of artistic way, that you could, that it had like a whole field of exploration that it kind of gave you.
Yeah, I guess maybe for me it was a bit different because I didn't have any real experience with analog. Like when I grew up in this very rural part of Thüringen, and there was I never had seen analog film, so I think it was, and I didn't go to New York with this idea of studying film. So I think it was actually I took a course called non-camera filmmaking, and there, like, this encounter for me was very like, wow, I had never seen anything like this. And I think my approach to analog making was more from the field of, okay, I can, because I think I grew up more doing a lot of handiwork or like working manual labor, I guess, maybe like with my dad. And so, and like it was very practical oriented. So we would watch films and then try out certain techniques. And to me, this was like really really great to with very little technical equipment, just with my hands, making the film, like scratching or painting or collaging. And so, yeah, I was just, this really sparked my interest that I could make a film on my own. Yeah, maybe with very little resources. So yeah, I think I started from like a different like approach, and then yeah, later I guess
I mean, I think for both of us, I think it was that you kind of saw all these other possibilities that you had not encountered before, in terms of like, oh, okay, so you can do this and this, or you could do that, or these people have been doing all these other things that we hadn't really encountered or thought about. But then you just saw, you saw kind of doors opening up to other ways of using the material and expressing things with it. Um, even if it's the same way of, oh, I don't even need a camera in certain circumstances, and there's a whole field of work that has been developed, artists that just created a whole body of work without really needing a camera, just working on the material. Or so it was like those encounters where you just see a lot of potential for yourself, if you don't want to, especially once you start kind of dealing with like the traditional, or whatever was the commercial way of doing things, and you saw all these limitations and all these, let's say, gates that were put in front of you, like, oh, you need to go find this much budget, you need to have this kind of crew, you need to be, you need to have this type of experience, you need to go through these steps that are kind of laid out in this kind of very conventional way of like, you have to write this script, you have to like get a cameraman, you have to get these actors. And quickly, I think, I mean, for me, I quickly kind of started to lose interest in that after trying it out. And I was thinking, yeah, but it was kind of very limited. And I think Anja was never interested in that. So,
I mean, for me also, like this whole experience, like there's just the thought of having a crew and needing to direct people. I was not, it just never felt like that I wanted to do this. Like even now, I mean, sometimes we do have help when we shoot certain scenes, like with sound. But even then, like, I guess I think we're most comfortable just shooting something by ourselves, like having
or collaborating with somebody on the same level, but
but not like this other person with different. I think it's also very hard to kind of find somebody who like, or who you want to work with and understands what you're trying to get, because often, like, sometimes when we work with later on with like somebody who's doing the sound, it took us a while, or like if it helps if yeah, if you don't constantly need to explain yourself. So I think, yeah, I mean, now, even nowadays for shooting, I think it's most comfortable when we are able to just shoot it ourselves with the two of us.
So you actually experience a lot of possibility in terms of using this media, and it also has your own freedom that you can do the way that you are you want to approach without having the crew or limitation of how the conventional way how the film is made. And then when I was reading your description, there was a two verb that caught my mind. I thought was very interesting. One part you were saying like let's say your intention is like to disrupt the dominant culture narratives, and then the other part was like subvert the manipulative power of images. And these two verbs of like disrupt and subvert, it was actually very interesting to me. I was wondering, on this approach, like what was your intention to create the type of work that you want to make, or what was exactly you are looking for, exploring?
Yeah, I think that happened when I guess what we were talking about before was sort of this first encounter with the material and the medium and the way of working, and getting to know like the tradition of these different let's say avant-gardes or artists that had explored the material. But it was also the fact that when we encountered it, I mean, it was already, let's say, film was not, or was not the only material. No, like video was a really much more widespread, and even then it was already, to use film became this sort of it was a choice. It wasn't something that was just given to you, right? If you went to film school already, it wasn't just like, oh, the standard is film, everybody learns how to use it, or every cameraman learns how to use it. It was something that you had to seek out, and it was something, let's say, special in that sense. And then for us, when we started thinking about what to do, of course, a lot of it was intuition and just kind of following our kind of taste and let's say whims, but also thinking about why we wanted to work with film, like with analog film, or even why we wanted to make images in an environment that was already kind of inundated by images. I mean, in our in our program there in New York, it was media studies, so there was already like a very like established tradition of criticality with images, and the way they work and the way they function in society, like still image, the moving image, the idea of film, and how I mean, basically kind of an understanding, or trying to gain an understanding of the power it has over individuals and over culture. And I think also the films that were speaking to me and to us were works that had that critical point of view, that were trying to work outside or in contrast to the same, let's say, like this mainstream visual culture, because I think what appealed to us in terms of the whole thing, like ontologically, of saying it's not just that you can work by yourself, but why would you work by yourself? Why would you create images without this large crew? And who are those images for? And what are they trying to say? And it became clear that it's all connected. Like if you make things a certain way, they also say things a certain way. And if you work individually or personally on things that are not, let's say, made for commercial purposes, you're going to end up talking about things that are not for commercial purposes, that you're not trying to sell anything, or you're trying to talk about a certain. So I think that was the thing that we had to kind of think about. What we wanted to make would in a way necessarily have to exist for us against this kind of, or had to relate to this larger background of visual culture and how it works and yeah, and how it tries to manipulate people, usually to sell them stuff. And I think even from the very first film we made, it kind of was about that, because it's using like found images to kind of present a sort of alternative position.
Yeah, I guess like this theoretical background, I guess is very important, because also in my undergrad I studied applied media science here in Germany, and then as Juan said, like our focus, or when we continued grad school in New York and studied media studies, there was like we had a lot of foundation classes on media theory. So I think this theoretical background kind of came through our education, and more we of course we got to experience a little bit on how to work with film and different techniques, but most of what we learned on filmmaking, we actually learned much later through the practice at the lab. So it was actually all the training on how, on how to develop all these different techniques, on how to use a contact printer. All of this was kind of informal training we received at the lab and through all the filmmakers that came passing through. And so I guess we have this split. So yeah, we don't really come from like a art school background.
Because I also really resonate with one you were mentioning, if you create image at a certain way, then it will speak at a certain way. And that's what I actually experience in your work. Your both work together is like your theme, let's say. I feel your subject, if I can call it subject, it usually are so diverse, but they somehow fall into the catalog of like myth or history or technology, or it may be even more. And they somehow all connect with certain kind of narratives. And then that's also what I sense. It seems a certain way of a narrative or twist of perspective. It seems something you interested. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more this feel, maybe also connect to your background, like this kind of thing in your work, and then also the way you apply the narrative or create a narrative for the film.
I mean, once we were let's say exploring this idea of this sort of personal type of filmmaking, this alternative way of making films, and getting to know how people and the different, I don't know, schools and traditions, and the history of it, if you start kind of going into it, you can't like separate the films from any context in a way. And this was interesting because you can kind of, yeah, everything is kind of connected to a place and a society. And when you start kind of experiencing things, let's say in that way, for us it was like you kind of experience the whole thing. Like it's very hard to divorce a film from where you saw it and in one context. Like when we were in New York, through a teacher of ours, of both of ours, Jeannie Leota, I started an internship at Anthology Film Archives. And then I didn't know anything about that place. And suddenly I was there, and this entire world, I kind of entered into it without not really knowing anything or even caring about it. And then it was kind of this also pretty astonishing encounter with a whole, if in New York there was no artist run film lab, but there was an entire ecosystem that was built kind of on the sidelines of mainstream culture to create a place for a whole different type of filmmaking. And that was interesting. So it was almost, you couldn't really separate the films you saw there from the place and the history. Once you started going into it, you start seeing, oh, this is all connected. Like it carries its own context in a way. And if you're watching, then I mean that was kind of the thing of being interested in watching prints and then caring about the format, because then you realize like the medium and the work also go together. You can't separate them really. Like, yeah, if you want to film and if you know about a film and you know, oh, this film, there's a 60 millimeter print, and they're going to project the print. And then once you make that connection between the projection and the work, the material and the intentions of whoever made it, then it really opens this whole thing. And I mean, those are narratives, those are stories. Like you go into those places, it's like, you know, it's like kind of going into like some kind of church, even though it's like a courthouse or whatever it is. And then suddenly you're encountered with like hundreds of stories just from talking to people and anecdotes. And I think that somehow that seeped into from the beginning what we were trying to do, because we realized, yeah, you can separate these things, and even if you say, oh, these works are non-narrative or abstract or whatever work it could be, it still carries everything with it, like its whole history, and the experience kind of is fed through all those things, whether it's like, oh, you encounter something in a festival or in a gallery or in a cinema, and all those encounters change a work. So I think it sort of happened that from the beginning we were thinking of how to create or how to work, also how to use that as well in the films, like how to kind of open them to their environment in a way, like, oh, they exist in a place, they exist in a world, and this is all constructed.
But I think maybe what I understood Litun's question a bit differently, but like, I mean, yeah, you just said it's constructed. Like, I think like this realization that all narratives around us, like not just in film, but in general, like all these narratives around us are constructed and can also easily collapse. And it's like you live in a certain society with a certain narration, and yeah, it's also like fake in a sense, like all these things that we can't even think anything beyond that anything else could exist. So yeah, like I think this is also like, I mean, because also of our background, I mean, you come from Colombia, I come from like the GDR, like it's like, you know, like there you even had like, so I think this is both places that made us very suspicious also of these like these narratives, because in a sense, like, yeah, there's like a state that doesn't even exist anymore, so that whole narrative already collapsed. So of course, like that also does, like, you know, like it's we constantly, I think, question like what are the narratives that are being given to us and by whom, and how, like, why do we take them for granted, and can't we find alternative ways of envisioning? And I think this is also what we're trying to do with the films, that like the way that we use narrative or this voiceover, it's often like it never is coherent really. It's always like
well, it's coherent to itself
but like it does kind of like,
yeah, but I think
supposed to also like like get to the like the viewers, like, huh, like who am I listening to, why is this person, like, you know, what's the intention? It should not be that I feel like it like, yeah, it shouldn't be that how do you say, like, and that it's being taken over, that you like you should start to question like it should, like, you know, because often, like, I mean, a narrative in a commercial film, you don't question the narrative. It really is like it's not that you don't question, but like it leads you along. It doesn't have many flaws maybe. And I think this is, for us, I think it should have flaws. Like it should kind of be incoherent or kind of,
yeah, I think what Anja saying, or what I how I understood it is, or thought about it, was that we're always inside a story anyway, like in our culture, in our society, in our environment. There's always ideologies at play, there's always narratives, there's always myths, like you were saying, there's always these strands, and it's very hard to actually like step out of them and look at them. I don't think you can have that perspective. Like we don't are trying to say, oh, look, you have this position, you can place yourself, this viewpoint that gives you this kind of view of the landscape, and then you can figure out, oh, this is true, this is false, this is right, this is wrong. That gets into like paranoia and conspiracy, and that's not really what we're interested in. We were more interested in seeing how actually all these different narratives and stories kind of permeate everything, and they permeate film and art, and they can actually be, yeah, like Anja was saying, they purport to show something very coherent and concrete, when in reality they're always full of flaws and incoherences and contradictions. And for us, like the using film kind of, because it was already this material that was in many ways considered obsolete, it kind of was a good way to really like dig at those contradictions and see what was there, and what you could like make from that, from the fact that things didn't fit and were kind of, yeah, like full of flaws and faults.
Yeah, I guess we never really wanted to convince anybody of anything. Like it wasn't about, yeah, that impulse.
Yeah, I think maybe every film is a bit different, but I remember some of the film, like when I'm listening to this voiceover or narratives, sometimes I feel it's almost like introducing me something or guiding me to see something. But at some point I was like, is something a bit strange in there, what I'm listening? And then in the end, sometimes almost like it feels like a talking to me, or like a talking to me in a certain way, almost like affirmation, some of them. That was very interesting. And I think that I have recognized in one of the performers I have seen. But maybe I thought, talking about the narrative and also the story that you structure, or the perspective you create in your work. For example, I was wondering, would you like to tell a bit more about this work? I don't know if I pronounce correct. Heliopolis, you including some text as well. I was wondering, maybe you tell a bit how this work started, and also how you decide this format.
Wow, that's so long ago, June.
I mean, I think
do we remember? Or we're like making something now too.
That's okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that film was done when we were kind of making a lot of work that was, like you said, where we were addressing the audience directly, like speaking in the term of like to you in a way, like the viewer as an individual you, which was interesting to us also because like in an audience it's a collective experience, and that was also something that was always interesting to us, the fact that it's a group of people, but they all feel themselves as individuals, and that the film, because it's this, and of course for us, it's like the projector projecting, it's this machine that is kind of, the machine does the talking in that sense. Like whoever made the film, it was finished, and now it's been encoded into the material, and then the thing is turned on, and whoever made it could not be, is probably maybe not in the room, or could be dead, but the message continues. So this was always something kind of interesting to us, and almost spooky in a way. It's almost like this thing that's speaking from beyond the grave or something, and speaking to you. And I think that around that time we were also like looking at hypnosis and different techniques that were used in hypnosis, yeah, to create like a space for whoever was being put in this state, and different states of awareness. I think we were not really so interested in like actually trying to hypnotize an audience, or do these techniques that could either come from like a sort of illusionist like entertainment thing, or from a sort of medical thing, but we were more interested in what happens under, what is the sort of psychological thing that happens in these states. And I think that film was within that kind of, let's say, like research of finding a way to address the audience and have them kind of go through a kind of a sort of journey, like beginning to end.
But it was
And
also about all these definitions. We were very, I think it's also, I mean, often
Yeah.
we pick up things on our travels, like books or certain images or something out of different bookstores or flea markets or something. And I think the impulse also for Heliopolis was also a book about definition, like it was an urban dictionary. I feel it was
the idea of how to define or create an actual space, like the Heliopolis is a city, and we were thinking somehow of how do you create a journey through an actual space without having the space or any images of the space or any very little images at all. I mean, in the film, it's basically a melting candles and color fields. So I was trying to think of a film that worked in that way, where the viewer itself would be, and I think that's the thing of the definitions, and the think of in the film you're asked to read definitions, and then at one point you're prompted to read certain words, read things out loud, and the fact that the let's say the projector, the film is asking you to take these actions, and then you're confronted with your choice or supposed choice of are you going to do it or not. Even if you refuse, you're already put in this situation where the film is already prompting you and telling you, and even denying the prompt is already this action that the film forced, and that was kind of the game of the film, I guess, what we were playing with then.
Maybe it's also depending which films, but I was wondering, some of your film are quite script, like you create this narrative or stories, and then you also choose a specific imagery, and sometimes using subtitle text and a voice over sometimes. And I was wondering how was the order like during your creation? Like, how do you merge everything together? Like, is there a certain order, or is there a certain way of working that you decide, okay, for example, I want to use this image, this type of technique, or this type of way of structuring the film?
I would say that we first, for us, always the images come first, or like we have a certain topic or theme, and we loosely know we are gathering images. Often we just gather images, we are shooting something, we're interested in a certain technique. Sometimes we treat these images in the dark room, and the narration is always a second step. So this comes then in the editing process. And yeah, often like sometimes we make images and then don't use them at all for like a while. And so then later we feel, oh, this fits in this film, or it could be part of that. So
Yeah, sometimes it's just a technique that we want to try, and then we gather enough material. Like in that film, I think a lot of it was having we had a special motor where we could shoot these melting
time
candles,
lapse,
this
yeah.
time lapse. And first, I think it was okay. What do we shoot? Let's shoot something in time lapse. What do we shoot? Do we want that's not extremely long? Like we don't have to leave the camera there for days or something. So we thought, oh, okay, candles, melting candles. So
And we just actually got this like very cheesy, like figurative, like from somewhere we got like this candle, this flower candle. So it was kind of, it almost was like a good test to test the motor that we got. And then from that, we were interested. I think also we were interested in making molds. Just because.
No, I think when we shot one candle, we melted a flower candle, and then we realized after we shoot it, we can only do it once, and then we don't have it anymore, and that was it. So if something goes wrong, and then it's like, oh, then we actually have to buy multiple ones, or we have to make copies. And then we realized that if we tried to make copies of these commercial candles, they come out pretty funky, like they really look nuts. And then that became part of it. I think a lot of the things of also us trying to do things in a certain way and then realizing all the mistakes we make, we usually then end up going along with that and figuring out, okay, this is actually what the thing is pushing us to is to. So then we ended up making our own copies of all the candles and using both original and copy. So it's like games like that where you let the thing kind of pull you wherever it wants to go, because we don't really have like a big plan other than, oh yeah, let's try to make something, and then we just go along with it, and it usually takes a long time. I think we were doing that candle stuff for a couple of years.
Not years.
Yeah, I think it took a long time.
Well,
More
I
than a
remember
year.
that certain candles actually melted really, really slow. So we had to actually have them like burn overnight. And so we were like waking up once so often and checking that we're not burning down our apartment. So yeah, it became a bit of a commitment. Yeah, a bit of, but yeah, I guess. But I think also with the mold making, then it became its own kind of research then too, but not to the extent that we wanted to make perfect molds. We were kind of also happy with these crooked, weird molds. So yeah, I guess it started from like just this tiny experiment, and then looking at the footage, having this experience of just getting having this candle disappear, I suppose.
Yeah, you let the footage, or you let the project, the process tell you where to go, and then it kind of pulls you. So usually, and then sometimes it just stops and doesn't go anywhere, and then you just put that stuff away and wait. And sometimes you just keep going until it becomes a thing. So we never really had the idea that we have to kind of fit things to it. That's why also the films are different in that sense, because we didn't really have the thing of, oh, we're going to explore a certain technique over like years and years, or we're going to develop. Things kind of come and go, and usually it was a curiosity about what we could do, and sometimes it was, yeah, just an encounter with, yeah, like a gift or a toy, or somebody would give us some kind of lens, and then that would become like the basis, or a book, or an image. I mean, even from the beginning, that was what I was saying. We were always kind of working with things that we found, because it was kind of this encounter with our own context, like our own, like every culture, every place we find ourselves in. You're kind of trying to look at it and think about these things that surround you. Many times, of course, it would be images, but a lot of times it was also objects or songs, or yeah. So because we didn't think we needed to have these very specific plans, we didn't feel like we didn't have to restrict ourselves to. So it was kind of always has been this kind of having this open mind and open relationship to your surroundings, and you travel, you encounter things, and you go into some small shop or something, and you find a strange postcard, and then that becomes a film, or that becomes an installation, or whatever it is. You kind of stumble into something and you let it kind of talk to you, and then in a way that thing kind of possesses you and then forces you to do something with it for like years, and then finally you did it, and that's what happened. And then it's hard to say how it all happened.
Yeah, and I guess like that's also because we don't have a set plan of like, okay, this is a topic, this is what we want to investigate. We do often have multiple projects at the same time, because yeah, I mean, yeah, we do sometimes have like these longer film projects where it's more where we had written a treatment, and this is kind of, we have more an idea of what we want to do, but on the side we always have these just yeah, these things that are just experiments more.
Yeah,
And
and
where
even
we,
those
yeah,
long projects work the same way in the end, because we say, okay, if we have like an actual topic that we're supposedly researching or making a film about, yeah, we say all that, and we do that so we can get, if it's like, oh, it's a longer project, then we will need more funding because we want to shoot more film material. But in the end, we work very similarly, where we're just gathering images, just also kind of by instinct and intuition. Like, you contact some people, then you go somewhere, you find some things, they tell you about something else, then so you kind of like let yourself bang into the world in that sense. And then it also usually takes a long time, and then finally, after you've gathered all these things, you kind of have this material, and then you can kind of look at it, and the thing will kind of, you hope that it will tell you what it is in a way.
Yeah.
So we're not sort of tied to the idea that, oh, we have to force ourselves onto these things. And I think that comes from working with analog and working in the lab and working with the material and working with projection, that it's actually, it's very hard to control. Like, if you have all the resources in the world, you get closer, and I guess that's how the industry worked. But if you have little resources, the like analog film and or these old machines, or it has its own, like, it'll do its own thing, and if you try to fight against it, it usually goes bad. So we try not to fight so much.
That's true, but it has its limits, because I guess with Instant Life, for example, we received a small support from the government, and there, when we handed in the film, the funding body was actually, it was like, oh, but you told us you're making a very different film. Like, what is this? This is not what you told us that you will make. So it was actually interesting, because for us it was totally what we thought we would make, but they looked at the end result and was like, no, but this is something else. This has nothing to do with your initial idea. So it's interesting to be also, then I guess we're also within the system, like, if you're trying to explain your way of working to like other, like, if you're, I mean, we're also working, we sometimes do get funding, of course, for our projects. There's also limits to the way that we can work in this way, and the acceptance of the system of working this way. So
Because your film always looks so well made. I always so surprised to hear the way of how you work, because I always thought, oh, you will be so well planned for a lot of things. But I'm also super happy to hear the way your work is, the way of working is like you start on something, or you encounter something, and that this thing guide you to multiple things, and then eventually go somewhere, and that feels really organic. And then I assume that's probably also how you start the Instant Life, right? You found something in LA. Would you like to tell a little bit about that project?
yeah, I mean, Instant Life was, we did this project in collaboration with Andrew Kim, who's a good friend of ours, based in LA. And we had visited him in Los Angeles, and he told us that he was very interested in matte paintings, and these effects, like, because there's this whole industry of matte painters. So actually, initially, the idea for Instant Life was to work much more. Maybe I'm telling this wrong.
Yeah, I don't know if I remember the whole thing, but I think,
But
well,
then
but
we never really, nothing ever happened out of this. But then,
no, but
which story do you want? which story do you want to tell?
no, I think,
New story. This became another story. I love this.
I mean, I think it has to do what we were saying before, because we always, it's about like how to construct an image. It was kind of the thing. Like you said, oh, these images that we were making seem like they're very correct, but I think it was because our interest, of course, we worked very much by intuition, but when we realized, when we had to then actually make the image somehow, we really wanted to, yeah, we're usually quite careful with building it. It is this very, that's sort of that whole handmade aspect of it, that you kind of build this thing with your hands and you create it. And Andrew, his films, like we always like these films also because of that, because it was this kind of care that was put into creating these images that actually maybe in the end they don't look handmade, but you know that it had to be very carefully kind of constructed like this. Also, it's a bit about that whole kind of illusion of film that you're just watching still images and everything about it is this kind of magic trick, and it's how you build the magic trick. And I think that's kind of what was that film, because like Anja said, yeah, we were interested in matte painting because we were interested in these analog effects, like
Yeah.
how
Old visual
how were
Hollywood.
these, and of course they were developed by the industry in Hollywood, and Andrew's based in Los Angeles, and he knew somebody that worked with making matte paintings for Hollywood films, for studio films. And of course this is its own tradition, it's a skill that requires like years of training. And we were thinking, how can we include this idea of this constructed image, this image that is like put together from these parts, you know, like you would have a painted part of the image and then a part would be blacked out, and it could be on glass and it would be transparent, it would be done on set, so you would have painted and the real space kind of melding into each other, or you would do it then later optically with cameras, like melding images to create completely artificial spaces or objects. And I think this was really interesting to us. And then when we decided to do it, that's how Anya said the film complete became something else, but the basis of it was
Yeah, because also like
yeah.
I mean it became something completely else because the person Andrew's contact, we actually visited him all together and kind of told him what we were interested in doing. But I guess maybe it was way too vague, or it was so out of the realm what he usually works with, that for him there was no interest in collaborating with us. So it was also like, yeah, I guess in that sense this open process that you maybe find organic or interesting, like to some other people in the industry, this was way too messy, or like he couldn't really like. So I think this is why then we had to abandon this whole idea of and
Yeah, because we said, "Oh, you want to make some matte paintings for us?" You could, or we said, we asked him, his name was Rocco. We said, "Oh, would you, if you could?" Usually they make matte paintings, you know, for a film. So this is something that has been planned in terms of a scene, and they need a certain type of landscape or a certain type of space, and so they're restricted by the parameters of the script and the story. And then we thought, oh, if you could just do one for yourself, like whatever you would want, what would that be? And we couldn't really communicate that. It didn't really make sense for him because he works on this as uh, in terms of a job of like, I am employed to create this thing, and then his creativity goes into fitting the parameters of what somebody wants for him. And we were like, no, but if you have freedom, like what would you do? And then that really didn't make so much sense. Yeah, we couldn't follow that path in that sense of like trying to collaborate with somebody that actually works in the industry. So then the film we ended up doing did end up focusing still on these analog effects, but on our version of them. So it kind of similar to the thing with Heliopolis, where having let's say the commercially built object then leads you to try to make a copy of it. Then we were ending up making our own version of these things with the resources we had. So it was like tiny resources to try to make a copy of something, to create these fundamental illusions of film, which was kind of the main interest about the idea that in every aspect of it, you're dealing with a magic trick, uh, and it's how it's constructed that, like we talked about at the beginning, like how it's made and what you see are completely connected. So it's you can't separate one from the other. The meaning comes from the whole thing. So that film is, in the end, it's kind of that. It's the fact that these things cannot be divorced. Like when you go into like building an image with a certain way, you're already building all the meaning into it and all the the whole context comes in. And I think like a lot of those, I think for us it was because a lot of those analog effects nowadays have become totally fetishized, and people are like talking about how amazing there was, and before CGI was predominant, and oh, it looks so great, and oh, look, they were actually shooting it in camera, and all that stuff is a little bit, it's based on that idea that you're trying to when those things get separated, it kind of falls apart, and you're just trying to put back the context of, in a way, like the experience. Like if you ever see, you know, this thing of like, yeah, the experience of seeing something that was done a certain way.
Because you make films and you also make performance, and then I can see they are very connected. And I was wondering, when do you decide this work will be in a performative way, and when you decide this will finish as a single channel film or multiple channel film?
I mean, usually we know. I mean, we just
Like, what's the different approach?
yeah. I mean, I don't think there's in terms of gathering images, there's maybe not so much of a different approach. It's the same way that there's like an experiment or some kind of technique that we want to explore. So the gathering, I would say, is very similar if we shoot it for a single channel or if we do it for performance.
For some, we would say, oh, I think this will be a performance,
Yeah.
or this will be an installation, or this will be. But I think also at the beginning it was because some film projects, like that candle thing, they took a longer time, and then we were in a way also kind of impatient, and we thought, oh, there's things you can make that happen faster, that are more immediate. I mean, also with the performance, that was kind of the thing. Like we knew we wanted to make some films that exist as a film, in the sense of, yeah, you're in the room and the projector is running, and we can be there or not be there. But then also there was this other type of experience that happened when you're in the room, when you actually project for people, and when you're like directly involved in constructing the experience with the audience in the room. And that was like this, it was also for us, I think, a different type of experience. Like it was this kind of, it was more immediate, and then you could work, it allows you to work faster. So it also, that also dictates what the kind of thing you're doing. So I think that's what happened, where we had material that you could say, oh, with this we can actually develop this into something, and following parameters of like a live experience. So, you know, oh yeah, we'll use two projectors, we'll run these two things in parallel, we can make this type of
slow
sound.
them down.
Yeah, or we slow them down. Yeah.
So yeah, I think for like if we start shooting these images, I guess they're the same way, but then often like when we see them, like we're like, okay, this lends itself more to a performative approach because we want to slow them down, or we want to copy them multiple times. So yeah, like if maybe if we want the image to continually to be manipulated, then I guess we go more the performative route. But if we feel like, okay, the image as we shot it, we want to preserve, and with a clear kind of narration or like certain, then I think it's more a film, a single channel work. But yeah, as Juan said, it's for us working on a performance is often, yeah, if we work on very long film projects, it's really a good outlet to do something more immediate, like to have quicker results, to see something, test some idea. And yeah, because also you need much less footage often for a performance than for like a film.
For our
performances, because we often we modified our projectors. They can run very slow. A lot of our performances work with like 8 frames a second. So in that case, we don't actually need that much footage in order.
Yeah, and also sometimes it
something.
switches. I mean, that was kind of the thing, like the project sometimes tells you what it wants to be. I mean, usually it does, but like this film we made, Wolkenschatten, it started as a performance, and we actually showed it a couple of times live as a slideshow, and then we kind of realized, oh, this might actually work better as a film, or we think we should try to actually make this into a film. It doesn't make so much sense as a live performance, and then it became a film, and then it stopped being a performance. So I mean, that can also happen. It's kind of, you kind of have to follow it to where it wants to be.
And because you have created a lot of amazing works, I was wondering, could you each pick one work that it has something special to you personally in any way?
I don't think I can, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they're all, I don't know. I guess of every project you remember something special, or you encountered something, or you have some memory of making it. So I don't know. And I guess each film is a reaction from the last one. So there's something that we really enjoyed and we want to continue, or there's something that we didn't want to do anymore. And then that kind of is then reflected in the next work. So I feel like with each, I don't know, I would say with each film, we usually try to go into a different, even though, like, I mean, in terms of themes, there's like a lot of themes that are connected, or they're connecting these works. But I don't know. I think for me it would be hard to choose one film over, or like one that's more special,
Yeah, I don't know, special. I mean,
or like more meaningful. I don't know.
yeah.
What was your question? Meaningful? No, you said, or like, or has like a certain.
In any way, can be meaningful, can be different way. But I actually like what you said. Every work is kind of continuation of responding or continue research from the previous work. And then I also feel in your earlier work has some a little bit like a more observational, or more like almost like has a documentary aspect in there. For example, the
Mass monkeys?
yes, or earlier as well. And then I also thought, like, since you have been working quite a while, I was wondering if you notice your approach or your research has kind of changed or developed from the earlier film to now, for example.
Yeah,
For sure.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think to the previous question, sometimes it's just that certain films something happens in the film that you didn't realize, like it's not that you did it on purpose, and then something happens, and then I think when we started using images, and then sometimes we would add a type of voiceover or a sound, and then when those elements come together, you're like, you see it, and then you think, oh, okay, something is happening there that is not, it's almost beyond yourself or beyond ourselves. Like you can't pinpoint it, like, oh, that's me, that's you, that's what we wanted. Like this other space opens. Like I think in Wolkenschatten that happened, where we had this material, and then finally we put it together, and then it was like, oh wow, something is really happening there. I don't know what it is, but it's something I can't even recognize it. I don't recognize it in myself. It's just something that's there. So
Actually,
I think,
yeah, because just for Wegenschatten, because it was really weird. The first time we showed it was in a small place in Berlin. And I think I was there by myself because I don't know, you were not there. And then the reaction from the audience was so strong. And I was like, where's this? I couldn't really put it. And people were also like, there was one person who was really angry with us for misleading her with this narration to this really dark place. And so I think with this, yeah, I guess you sometimes feel like these reactions that we didn't anticipate at, or that we didn't like, yeah.
yeah,
know,
and I
but
think,
what
yeah,
you were saying.
no, I think that was the when I think when that started to happen in certain works, is also in things that we were doing live, and then we could see the reaction like right then when we were there. That's kind of when we started to see kind of the direction we could continue to go, because it kind of opened up this space that was like, you know, sometimes we said, oh, it's kind of like this space of the unconscious. It's this part where the audience kind of goes somewhere. If you and it's also, I mean, a little bit relating to hypnosis, is this other space of awareness. But it's also like really important for us that we also have no control over it. It's just this alternative space that opens, that maybe doesn't follow the same rules of like hierarchy and power that we have in let's say our common daily lives. And with that film and with some with performances and things we're doing, we started to see, oh, it was happening for us, even though we made it, but it was happening for us. Like, oh, this is something else that it's also beyond our own control. It's not something that we're dictating or manipulating, or like we're not the puppeteers, even though the film might have this structure of like a voice and things, and you suddenly realize by doing that, like almost like it's the opposite that happens. Like if you become very controlling, you can actually create a space where you completely give up control. And that was one realization that happened with some of those works. And then
So you would say Wolkenschatten is the, just to answer this question?
yeah, that was yeah, but I'm going into the next question, right?
Okay.
But
I just wanted to
yeah.
clarify that this is like
No, that was one happened. I mean, it also happened before when we did the hand dyes. I mean, it was just when those elements came together, like these separate, that we were like kind of thought of them as these separate elements, like could be like voice and image or sound and image, that kind of were working almost against each other, or there was some sort of internal conflict there. Then suddenly it opened this other space, this kind of space that for us was like, okay, this is actually new to us, and this is somewhere where we can try different things. And then that sort of the approach, right? If it was more documentary or more abstract or more narrative or more whatever, then it didn't even matter. Like then you could do whatever. I think that's kind of what happened, like in terms of developing. Like we really stopped caring about what genre or what style or what kind of the film has. It became more how can we create something that opens up that space and lets it exist for a group of people in a room where there is yeah, where these things kind of fade into something else, like these elements of these power structures or these elements of control actually become there's some alternative thing, which for us, or how we said before, it's like the cinematic experience allows for that, or it's always it always happens, but maybe if the film is made in a certain way, it can open that even more somehow.
Yeah, and I think like in terms, just to like maybe finish on that, this idea like, yeah, the cinematic experience, I think this is something that I mean, it was always important for us, but I feel like now with like the more recent work, this is something that we like to investigate even further, like all these elements on its own, and see where this can lead us to kind of even make it simpler, more and more simpler, like each aspect of it, not even having any images, or just working with certain parameters of just like what can we use as a surface to project. Like we have been building like rotating screens. We built this phosphorescent screen. Now we have this, we recently built this year, this screen that is that you can make transparent, or
Yeah, that switches on and off.
that switches between the states
transparent.
of transparent and solid. So yeah, I think maybe this is like something that we now are, or yeah, this is one of our interests recently, that to investigate more the cinematic experience and its elements.
Yeah, I think it's like what I was saying before is like the entire we realized even more and more that the entire context, the entire your whole environment when you experience anything like dictates and influences what's happening. And then it became more difficult for us to say precisely when does the film begin and when does it end. I mean, maybe, you know, it starts as soon as you enter the space and it ends, maybe it never ends. It doesn't end when you leave the space or when the projector's turned off. Like all those things are part of your experience. And we realized, oh, we can play with a lot of those elements and do something with them. Or even in a lot of cases you can't, because we don't have the resources to, you know, build our own cinemas, or but you can actually take whatever the world gives you and include it within whatever you think your activity is. Like, so then it became, like Anja said, like these less things, like how can you make a film without making any film, without using a camera or using any film material, or using, is that even a film? Can you, what are you, like, and does it matter? So I think that's more things that we're exploring now, that there is a kind of wholeness to any activity that can be read in many ways, and that you can kind of transform, and maybe just any small act already, any act that you take on, like deliberately or maybe not, is already part of the thing. Like this idea of how do you, of course, for us it's interesting in this sort of group context. So if you go to a place where you and I guess the idea of the cinema is kind of like a way to kind of frame it. So if you go to this place and you sit down and you're supposed to have this kind of experience that you assume is in a certain way, then what happens when that changes and either expands or contracts? So it's kind of very vague, because it starts to become very diffuse in a way. And then you start to think, if you're thinking in such a vague manner, then how can you actually do something there and try things out? So like Anja said, like, what is it like to just watch something go dark? Like if you have a screen that fades and you just watch it fade, what is that experience? And how does that, what kind of space that creates, like for you as for us, like doing it, and also for you sitting there and viewing it? And I mean, that's something that we thought, okay, this is a different space for us, like that kind of, what does that open?